have you ever felt that pressure?
Pressure.
Yeah, like to be perfect. Like, you have to have it all together.
Oh, yeah. All the time.
Yeah, like all the time.
Right.
So that's kind of what today's deep dive is about, kind of
Okay.
an antidote to that pressure.
I like it.
We're looking at this podcast called Embracing Imperfection.
Yeah.
And it's all about kind of like finding beauty in our flaws.
Right.
And celebrating what makes us,
yeah.
wonderfully human.
Yeah.
So are you ready to kind of ditch the pressure?
Let's ditch it.
And explore what self-acceptance could really mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that phrase, wonderfully human. It feels like a much needed pushback against this culture of,
totally
curated perfection.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with social media constantly setting these unrealistic standards.
Absolutely. And, this podcast, it's tackling it head on.
Okay.
Using expert interviews and everyday people's stories. But what really, what makes me curious is this emphasis on practical tips.
Yeah.
What resonates with you about that?
Well, for me, that signals that this isn't just, some feel-good fluff.
Yeah.
It's about giving listeners tangible tools to actually apply these ideas in their lives.
Right.
I mean, we all kind of know that self-acceptance is good for us.
Right.
But how do we actually get there?
Right, exactly.
That's where the practical comes in.
So let's put on our practical hats for a second.
Okay.
The podcast description mentions things like dealing with negative self-talk and setting realistic expectations.
Yeah.
What kind of specific tips do you think they might offer for those challenges?
Well, one that comes to mind is the idea of treating yourself like you'd treat a friend.
Oh, interesting.
Often, we're much harder on ourselves than we would ever be on someone we care about. So the podcast, I think, might encourage listeners to actually pause and ask, would I say this to a friend? It's a simple shift in perspective.
Right.
But it can be really powerful in challenging those negative self-talk patterns.
That's a really good point. Like, it's so easy to get caught in those negative spirals without even realizing it.
Absolutely.
The podcast also highlights the power of inspiring stories.
Okay.
Why do you think personal stories resonate so strongly?
Sure.
Especially like when we're talking about something so personal as self-acceptance.
Right. I think stories create connection. When we hear someone else share their vulnerabilities and triumphs, it makes us feel less alone in our own struggles. It's like, oh, they get it. They've been there too.
Right.
But you're right. There's potential downside. We can't.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Exactly. We can't let other people's stories dictate our own journeys.
Right.
It's about finding inspiration, not comparison.
Yeah, finding that balance.
Absolutely.
It's so key.
Yes.
And I think it ties into this bigger idea of authenticity being linked to joy.
Okay.
Could you elaborate on that?
Sure.
Like how embracing imperfection might lead to a more fulfilling life.
Yeah. I mean, imagine this. You're no longer trying to present this perfect version of yourself.
Right.
You're free to be genuine, to express your true thoughts and feelings, to take risks without the fear of failing perfectly.
Right.
In relationships, that vulnerability can foster deeper connections. In your creative life, it allows you to experiment and explore without judgment.
For sure.
And overall, it just takes the pressure off.
It does, yeah.
That freedom can be incredibly liberating and yes, lead to more joy.
So it's like holding on to this idea of perfection can hold us back.
Exactly. It's not about lowering our standards.
Okay.
It's about shifting our focus from achieving some flawless idea to simply being present, embracing the process, and celebrating our progress. That's where the real growth and fulfillment lie.
So listener, we've unpacked a lot. Self-acceptance, authenticity, letting go of perfectionism.
For sure.
But here's something to consider. If you could identify one area in your life where you're striving for, like unrealistic perfection, what would it be? And what if, instead of aiming for perfection, you focused on simply making progress? How might that shift impact your well-being, your relationships, and, your overall experience of life?
That's a great question to think about.
Yeah. It's something to ponder, isn't it?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's it for today's deep dive.
It was a good one.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll catch you next time.
See you later.
Bye.